Preparation may look complete, but UPSC Prelims 2026 showed something important. Completion is not the same as readiness. The paper did not just test whether aspirant had read a topic, it tested whether they could think through it. Could they eliminate smartly? Could they connect static concepts with current issues? Could they stay calm when the question was not direct? Could they take decisions under pressure? That is where many aspirants struggle, not because they did not study, but because their preparation stayed in input mode, reading more, collecting more, revising passively. UPSC needs more than that. It needs a preparation system that turns knowledge into judgment. That is what the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course is built for. Concepts are taught in a connected sequence. Current affairs is linked with static subjects. Tests help you identify gaps before the exam does. Answer writing builds structured thinking for mains. Mentorship helps correct your direction early. Build readiness from the beginning. VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course. Most aspirants treat optional as a subject. Toppers treat it as an opportunity to gain an edge, boost their main score and strengthen their final rank. The question is simple: simultaneous preparation today or overwhelming pressure later on? Because optional preparation cannot be built overnight after prelims. It requires time, depth, practice, refinement. Start early, prepare smart, stay ahead. Join the VisionIAS Optional Classroom Program 2027 and turn your optional into your strongest scoring advantage. With comprehensive syllabus coverage, expert faculty guidance, subject-specific answer writing support, personalized mentorship, regular tests and performance assessment. Starting 1st July, batches are available for anthropology, geography, history, philosophy, physics, PSIR, public administration, sociology. Register now and secure your seat.
So, good evening to all of you. So today we are meeting here with a specific objective: how to write good answers in our public administration paper 1. If you look at it in the past few years, what is the trend we can see in our public administration paper 1? UPSC is not focusing more on thinkers. They are focusing more on their theories than thinkers. Again, they are also giving a lot of importance to current developments in public administration, current events. Even in paper 1 also, the focus is on current developments in public administration. And you can see that, after some point of time, you cannot see any difference between paper 1 and paper 2 also in terms of the questions that are asked. Because the same question can be asked in both paper 1 and paper 2 also. Same type of questions can be asked in paper 1 and paper 2 also. As I keep on saying all the time, if you have to get into IAS, you must score at least about 275 marks in optional. And paper 1, your score has to be at least above 145, 150 marks. And that is not, you cannot compromise on that one. So the best part of it is that the thinkers are very less. Their theories are also not complicated. So how to get good marks? Let us see those things with the help of the previous year's question papers. Let us take this year's question paper, I think. This is a 2024 question paper. What are the questions which you think are difficult? I will discuss them. You can let me know. Any question which is difficult. Let me read those questions. Politics administration dichotomy, debate is still alive, comment. Mostly very conventional question. And formal organizations are made up of informal groups. Basically, Chester Bernard statement. Grapevine is a necessary evil, talking about both the advantages as well as disadvantages of grapevine. Healthy headquarters, field relations thrive on effective communication. That's what we can always say. MIS, Management Information Systems. Yeah. In fact, this class is for those who will be writing mains this year and also for to improve their answers. This is not for the beginners because it's about answer writing. I think I have done the beginners class sometime back. It is there on Vision YouTube channel also. You can watch those things. I have discussed the entire syllabus. Right? Media has become more of a societal lens than an institutional lens. McGregor's theory X and Y provide insights into human motivation. Good governance adds normative and evaluative attributes to the process of governing. So, is there any difficulty in terms of these questions? Do you find any? This is 2024, I think, not 2025. 2024 question paper. B. Yeah. Good governance adds normative and it adds normative and evaluative attributes to the process of governing. What do you mean by that? Normative and evaluative attributes to the process of governing. What is the meaning of that one? What is normative and what is evaluative? Exactly. Normative means ideals, what you want to achieve. If you want an efficient administrative system, what are the features that must be there in your administrative system as part of good governance? What are they? Transparency, accountability, participation, consensus, rule of law, economy and efficiency, effectiveness and equity, inclusiveness and equity, responsiveness. These are the normative aspects. Evaluative aspects means what? Whether those features are there in your administrative systems or not. Take the case of India. We have transparency with the Right to Information Act, but is it being implemented? That is what is called evaluative aspect. Take the case of accountability. We have accountability mechanisms, both internal and external accountability mechanisms. But are they effective? If they are not, what should be done? Rule of law. We have rule of law in letter. We have Article 14 talks about rule of law. But is it being implemented in reality? That is what evaluative. So good governance helps you to know about normative as well as evaluative attributes of the process of governing. And why? Because through normative aspects, you are fixing the ideals, the norms, the standards. Through evaluative aspects, you are knowing what exactly is there in your present administration. Combining both of them, you will know what kind of reforms you have to implement. That is the thing. Exactly. You have to interlink. That's what. Paper 1 should always be interlinked with Indian administration. Very important. Exactly. No, it is only for public administration optional. Only for those who are having public administration optional. And for others, if they want to take public administration optional, they will come to know what kind of questions are asked. That is the thing. This is optional first class. We will be starting optional classes from next week onwards, 7th. This is only some kind of introduction. Yes, I will be taking optional. There is offline. I just I've just had a discussion with them. Those who are taking online admissions, they will be allowed to sit in offline. No, no, it is there. I just got the message. So you can attend offline. Yeah, you can, don't worry, the classes will be starting from 7th. Not first, because, there is some kind of pressing problems are there. So we'll be starting from 7th, not from tomorrow. So we have time. And it will be there, both offline and online, everything will be there. You can attend in the classroom also, so don't worry. So that is what we say. And then you have to explain them with the help of Indian administration. For example, RTA. We have implemented RTA, but there are problems in implementation of RTA. Accountability. We have accountability mechanisms, but they are not effective. Rule of law. Participation. So again, that is what we said, participation is a very important feature of good governance. Why? Why? Because in dictatorial regimes, the decisions are taken by the dictator without involving the stakeholders. That is the reason why what happens, it results in bad governance. Most of the decisions are taken by the dictator, to benefit his self-interest. That's the reason why good governance is that participation. The stakeholders, people, must be given an opportunity to participate in decision making and implementation processes. I gave this example of the government taking a decision about starting an industry in forest areas, tribal areas. You must ensure the participation of the tribals so that their interests are protected. Otherwise, if you take the decision and improve the decision on the tribals, what happens? There will be opposition. That results in policy paralysis. That's why participation. I said, take the case of the road constructed in front of your house. Right now, we are moving towards participation. How? With the help of 73rd Amendment, 74th Amendment, with the help of Syrian charters, with the help of Sevottam model, which we will be discussing as part of Indian administration, all of them. Right? Yeah. Mm. Mm. In evaluative attributes means, for example, transparency, it should be the ideal. And how much amount of transparency is there? That is what is called evaluative attribute. Good governance says that, it says that, your administration system is efficient if there is 100% transparency in your administration. And if it is only 50%, that means your administration is far away from having good governance. Exactly. Basically, normative means fixing the standards, and evaluative means what exactly, where exactly you are in terms of those standards. When we study about Max Weber's bureaucracy, why do we study Weberian bureaucracy? Max Weber himself called it as an ideal model. That means it is not found in reality. Then why are we so much obsessed with Weber? To find out where exactly we stand in terms of Weberian bureaucracy. And that is the reason why we say that Max Weber's bureaucratic theory of ordination is the basis of CPA, comparative public administration. Because Weber has provided a standard, and we can see where exactly we are, compare both of them, and then try to improve. In the same manner, that is what is good governance. Yeah. Yes, whenever you talk about participatory and participative management, you can always link it to the thinkers, whether it is Chris Argyris, whether it is Rensis Likert, whether it is Douglas McGregor. You can include all of them, definitely. Public administration is part of governance. Governance is a much bigger term. That will be done in public administration. This year, 2025, almost all the questions that are about what you have asked only in public administration. The difference between governance and government. Government is one of the institutions that is responsible for governance. There are so many other institutions. Right now, private sector is part of governance. Civil society organizations are part of governance. Media is part of governance. Pressure groups are part of governance. Multinational companies are part of governance. And you have to include all of them. NPJ in a new public governance is different. This new public governance has come into existence after the NPM experiment has not succeeded, new public management. As part of new public management, we have opted for a neoliberal state. It mostly resulted in the nexus between the government and the private sector, which mostly led to crony capitalism also, wherein the other stakeholders have been left out of governance. That is when we talk about new public governance. Yes, that is what last year the questions were asked, 2025. Almost all the questions are from NPM to NPG. That's what we say. Next, regulatory authorities are independent and effective for controlling service delivery activities but are subjected to extraneous factors. Do you agree? That is what we keep on saying all the time. We have so many regulatory authorities. Security and Exchange Board of India is there. Telecom Regulatory Authority of India is there. Competition Commission of India is there. Then Pension Funds Regulatory Development Authority is there. These are all financial sector, Security and Exchange Board of India. But they are not effective. Why? Because some extraneous factors, outside factors. What are those outside factors? Politicians impacting the functioning of regulatory authorities. Bureaucracy dominating the regulatory authorities. And these regulatory authorities not having any kind of powers, real powers. For example, what are the powers of a regulatory authority? Regulatory authority like SEBI or Competition Commission of India, they have the powers of what we call a civil court. What do you mean by that? They can only impose fines. If the fines are not paid, what can they do? They will say fine. Beyond that, nothing else. They cannot do anything. That is where extraneous factors. And they are not having credibility also. Why they are not having credibility? Who are being appointed as members of these regulatory authorities? Again, former civil servants. Do they have any kind of skills and knowledge? Not at all. That is the reason why they are not enjoying credibility among the stakeholders also. Exactly. For example, take the case of CCI, Competition Commission of India. Could they prevent monopoly in maximum sectors in India? Take power sector, take telecom sector, take electricity, civil aviation. In all the sectors, we have only either monopoly or duopoly. What are they doing? Director General of Civil Aviation is the regulatory authority. What are they doing? Did they prevent the duopoly in the civil aviation sector? That is what we say. And that is what the question. As you can see here in paper 1, almost all the questions, they are not asking any questions about thinkers as such. Directly, practical aspects. Yeah. Not at all. You cannot be saying those kind of things, saying toothless tiger and those kind of things. That is not at all. You are going to be a civil servant, please remember. Your language has to be completely civilized. For example, as part of criticism of the President of India, we say that, the President of India is, was criticized during emergency as, during emergency when the President, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, he was severely criticized. Right? Can you go to the President and tell the President that, Mr. President or Ma'am President, I think that you are useless? Can you say those kind of things? Obviously not. Those things which you cannot say when you get into services, can you write them in the examination? That is what. Never. Language becomes very, very important. You say that they are not effective in terms of their functioning. And at the end of the day, it is all about communication. If I tell you, if I say that you are a fool, you will get offended. On the other hand, if I say that you are an intelligent person, but sometimes you commit mistakes. And that is what UPSC is. UPSC is all about language. And how do you learn this language? Economic survey, government documents. Economic survey never says that public sector enterprises are a failure. It says that they have achieved significant success, but they did not live up to the expectations of the people. So the problem is with the expectations of the people, not with the public sector enterprises. And that is what you have to write and you have to learn, you have to understand in UPSC preparation. The entire UPSC, especially our public administration, because you can see most of the questions are critical of the government only. Most of the questions are critical of the government. So you have to do that balancing act. You cannot become emotional and criticize the government left, right and center. Right? Social audit, the development of administrative law in a welfare state has made administrative tribunals a necessity. Ineffectiveness of legislative control over administration stems from the various factors, hence in ensuring effectiveness, a comprehensive approach is the need of the hour. Again, legislative control over administration. For example, what are the instruments in the hands of the legislature to control administration? Question hour, 0 hour, short duration discussion, passing of bills, giving approval to the budget, then parliamentary committees. Why they are not effective? And what should be done? So, as you can see here, there is no difference between paper 1 and paper 2 questions. That's what I always say, almost 80% of syllabus of public administration is there in your general studies papers. If you are good with your GS, you will be good with your public administration and vice versa also. It is as simple as that one. Right? Then ERG theory, existence, relatedness and growth. Again, this is a part of thinkers only. Scientific measurement, human relations theory are two distinct approaches for improving efficiency and productivity. This human relations theory, why did it come up? Human relations theory had come up because of the success of scientific management theory. People think that it is because of failure of scientific management theory. No. It is a success of scientific management theory. Why? Scientific management theory has succeeded in satisfying the basic needs of the people. Once their basic needs are satisfied, they are looking for higher level needs. Abraham Maslow. They are looking for social needs. They are looking for self-esteem needs. And that is where human relations theory had come into existence. If you are able to bring these points in your answers, then automatically you will get good marks. And that is the secret of success in public administration papers. Right? Again, new public governance. That's what you have asked. An emerging paradigm is contrasted with market-based approaches of NPM. In NPM, as we say, the problem is that the government treats itself as a service provider and considers people as customers or consumers. Are the people consumers or customers? No. If that is the case, what about the poor people? Can the poor people be left out of development just because they cannot pay for them? For example, there are floods in a particular district and so many poor people are stranded there. The government has sent boats to ferry these people to safe areas. And following NPM, cost benefit analysis, the government says that anyone who wants to safe passage must pay 500 rupees. That is what is NPM. Should the government be behaving like that? That is the reason why we have NPG, New Public Governance, wherein the government should not be treating people as subjects or consumers. They should be treating people as citizens with respect, with dignity, with equity, with justice, with transparency, with participation, with responsiveness. That is what we say NPG, New Public Governance. And that is the reason why we say that NPG is equal to NPA plus NPM, New Public Administration plus New Public Management also. That is what we find in a New Public Governance. Right? And yeah.
Can you explain the difference between governance, good governance, and public governance?
Yeah.
Always
Very good. I'll explain this one. governance, good governance, and new public governance, right? And new public management, NPS, new public service. For all these things, governance is the starting point. What is governance? In simple terms, governance means taking decisions and implementing those decisions. Simple. Governance is the process of taking decisions and implementing those decisions. It means creating the institutions and ensuring effective functioning of those institutions. Why? Who has to take decisions and who has to implement the decisions? It has to be done by the institutions. Political executive in one institution responsible for policy making. Bureaucracy, another institution responsible for policy implementation. Governance includes creating these institutions and ensuring effective functioning of those institutions. And governance also includes what kind of decision they have to take. They have to take decisions related to utilization of resources. Utilization of resources. They have to take decisions related to utilization of resources. Their human resources, physical resources, natural resources, geographical resources, economic resources, technological resources. You have to take decisions related to utilization of all these resources, human resources, physical, natural, geographical, economic and technological resources. Right? And then governance also includes, as I said, the interconnectivity, interlinkages, and the communication between the government and other stakeholders, especially the people. Through governance, what do people do? They will express their problems. They will come out with their problems. Then people also have certain duties to fulfill, because citizens not only have rights but also duties also. And through governance, they will try to find solutions to their problems, resolve the disputes, because there are so many sections of society. Farmers are demanding something from the government. Industrialists are demanding something from the government. And women are demanding something from the government. Tribals are demanding something. Trade unions are demanding something. Governance is the mechanism wherein all these demands are orchestrated in a proper and efficient manner so that solutions can be found to all their problems. That is what is called governance. By taking the decisions and also implementing those decisions, we can find solutions to the problems of the people. That is what is called governance. Private sector is looking for something, and workers are looking for something. Every section of society has problem. Apart from that, there are macro issues facing the country, law and order, or increasing inequalities, or protection of the weaker sections, or promoting the interests of the backwards. So how you can do all the things? Again, governance is the instrument. So governance is a much larger term, much bigger term, that involves everyone. Government, private sector, politicians, bureaucracy, civil society organizations, NGOs, MNCs, multilateral institutions, media, pressure groups, all of them are part of governance. Much bigger term. Out of which government is only one of the institutions responsible for governance. Right? This is governance. From governance, all other terms had come into existence. From governance, we have seen the emergence of all other concepts. The first concept that had emerged from governance is good governance. This concept of good governance has emerged in 1990s as part of conditionalities imposed by the World Bank. when these developing countries took loans, they could not repay the loans. They could not repay the loans, and they have approached again the World Bank. Please give us more funds. Then World Bank has said that we will give you funds. But what is the guarantee that you will utilize the funds in an efficient manner? Because they did not have a good governance previously, the funds were misused and they could not repay the loans. World Bank has said that we will give you the funds, but make sure that you have good governance in the functioning of your political and administrative systems. And that is how the concept of good governance has come. And what exactly is this good governance? It has defined good governance with the help of these 8 features: transparency, accountability, participation, consensus, rule of law, economy and efficiency, inclusiveness and equity, and responsiveness. So from governance came the term good governance. Please remember, governance is a neutral term. Governance only talks about one thing, that is taking decisions and implementing decisions. It is a neutral term. That means, we are not talking about either good governance or bad governance. We are only talking about only one thing, that is governance. It is only a neutral term. Then how do we know it is good governance or bad governance? How do we know whether it is good governance or bad governance? We will come to know about whether it is good governance or bad governance on the basis of how these decisions are taken and how they are implemented. The quality of a decision and the quality of implementation is what that decides whether it is good governance or bad governance. And when do you know it is good governance? When there is transparency, when there is accountability, when there is participation, and when there is consensus. That is when we call it as good governance. So from governance came the term good governance. Then proceeding further, then this NPS, New Public Service, and the New Public Governance, both of them had come into existence at the same time, around 2010. Why? Why? Because before NPS and NPG, what came was NPM, New Public Management. This new public management had come into existence in America, wherein the failure of the welfare state had forced America to adopt a radically different philosophy towards governance. That is what is called NPM state, wherein America has recognized that this state, public sector, has not been successful in realizing the objectives of welfare and development. These public sector enterprises were incurring huge amount of losses because of monopoly. And people are not also able to, benefit out of this state monopoly. Right? That is when this concept of NPM had come into existence. In fact, even before the concept of NPM had come into existence, even before the concept of NPM had come into existence, we have seen the emergence of NPA. In fact, you can say that NPM is one of the instruments to achieve the objectives of NPA. NPM is one of the instruments to achieve the objectives of NPA. NPA means New Public Administration. Again, it had come into existence because of the failure of the old public administration, or traditional public administration dominated by Max Weber and classical thinkers. With focus on value neutrality and rule orientation, this traditional public administration has failed to achieve the objectives of development administration. The objective of development administration is to bring about changes, whereas Weberian bureaucracy is modeled mostly to ensure stability and continuity. That is where it has been a failure. And that is the reason why in India also this Weberian bureaucracy is a failure. And that is the reason why in India we have recognized the importance of NPA. Not only Indian government recognized the importance of NPA, even UPSC also recognized the importance of NPA. And what did they do? They recognized the importance of NPA and they have included NPA as one separate paper of your general studies, ethics paper. they have included the importance of NPA. That is the reason why I always say that if you have public administration optional, and if you are not scoring best marks in GS papers, it is a crime. Because entire syllabus of public administration is what? The syllabus of general studies. Simple, because you are going to be administrator, and UPSC wants you to have knowledge of administration. All the questions in GS are only about administration. NPA thinkers, as you study Dwight Waldo and others, say that the traditional public administration dominated by Weberian norms has not been successful in achieving the objectives of welfare administration. It must be replaced with what they call it as new public administration. And what is there in the new public administration? They said that this NPA has 4 objectives, 4 goals. What are they? Change. They must bring about change. Bureaucracy is expected to bring about change. Why Indian bureaucracy is not efficient? Why they have been a failure? Because their status quo is in their objective. They cannot bring about the change. In India, what is status quo means? Status quo in India means poverty. Status quo means exploitation. Status quo means illiteracy. Status quo means ignorance. Status quo means widening gap between the rich and poor people. Do you want this kind of stability? No, you want empowerment of women, children, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs and minorities. For that you need to bring about change. And that is what NPA says. Bring the changes, not status quo. And to bring the changes, what do you need? Values. And that is the reason why we have one full paper on these values called ethics paper. Because it is recognized all over the world that value neutral Weberian bureaucracy has not been successful in bringing about changes. So instead of this value neutral Weberian bureaucracy, what we require is value committed bureaucracy. And that is the reason why, as I said, UPSC included 250 marks of ethics paper. And what kind of values are you talking about? That is where NPA talks about. The most important value is equity. Equity. What is equity? Pardon? Equal? Equity means quality of outcomes is called equity. For example, improving the literacy rate is outcome. Constructing the schools is output. After constructing the schools, you have to employ the teachers, recruit the children, and provide quality education to them. That is when you improve the literacy rate. So, when we talk about a district collector, he should focus on outcomes. That means, by spending 500 crores, if you improve the literacy rate from 50% to 60%, that means you have become effective. Right? You have improved the education standards also, everything. But is it sufficient? No. It is necessary but not sufficient. So by spending 500 crores, if you provide quality education to 10,000 children, which is good. But what is more important? Who are those 10,000 children? Who are they? That is where equity comes into picture. The children should be girl child, scheduled castes, tribal children, minorities, economically weaker sections, OBCs. If out of 10,000 children, 8,000 children belong to these sections of society, then you say that equity is achieved. Otherwise, equity is not achieved. Why? Because, children of rich people, do they require free education provided by the government? Then why are you providing education to them? Children of people living in urban areas, do they require? Private schools are there. And where you should be providing? Whom you should be providing? Rural areas, girl child, scheduled castes. That is where you talk about equity. Equity is what you call quality of outcomes. Not quantity, but quality of outcomes. And how can you ensure quality of outcomes? How can you ensure quality of outcomes? You can ensure quality of outcomes only by being biased in favor of weaker sections. That is the reason why we study all these values in ethics paper. As I said, our ethics paper is nothing but an extension of NPA, New Public Administration. You want your bureaucracy to have the most important value, that is equity. And that is the reason why, as part of good governance, we also talk about inclusiveness and equitable growth, equity. Because unless and until you help the poorer sections, the rich people can take care of themselves. Do Virat Kohli's children require government education under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan? Does Mukesh Ambani require free housing under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana? Who needs those things? Poorest of the poor sections of society. And that is what NPA thinkers have said. Forget about economy, efficiency, everything. What is most important is equity. Equity. And then another thing that NPA says is relevance. As a bureaucrat, as an administrator, as an academic discipline, what is important is relevance. For example, as an administrator, how do you become relevant? When do you become relevant? As an administrator, sorry, when you are able to provide solutions to the problems of the people. That is the reason why these administrators must focus on solutions. That's what NPA says. Always find solutions to the problems of the people. What is the point of following only rules and regulations? You must focus on realizing outcomes. That is what Mission Karmayogi also says. From rule orientation to role orientation. That is what it says. And of course, NPA talks about consumer orientation, consumer focus. Treat people as consumers and provide quality services to them. And how to do that? How to achieve all these objectives? That is where NPM came into existence. NPM, that is what NPM also says. Treat people as consumers and must consider government as service provider. But what is the problem with NPM? What is the problem with NPM? The problem with NPM is that its strength is also its weakness. NPM focuses on economy and efficiency. NPM focuses on accountability of the government. NPM focuses on having a private sector orientation within the government. NPM focuses on treating government as only a service provider and making citizens as consumers or customers. The problem is that this NPM might be good for countries like America, UK or developed countries. Why? Why it is good for those kind of countries? Because their citizens can pay for services. What is the per capita income of America? $80,000. That means the poorest person in America is 40 times richer than richest person in India. Right? So America people can pay for services. So what people are looking for is quality, standard of services. And that is where NPM comes into picture. Treat people as customers. What is the difference between public administration and private administration? As we study in the first chapter. In public administration, we say that the government has monopoly. When you have monopoly, do you really bother about the standard of services? or the price of the product. You are a monopolist. You are a monopolist means you are the only one who is providing services to the people. Do the people have any kind of option? Do the people have any kind of alternative? They have to take only from you. So are you concerned about the quality? Are you concerned about the cost? Are you concerned about the satisfaction of consumers? No. To overcome this, NPM had come into existence. It has said that end the monopoly of the state, provide opportunity for private sector, ensure competition for services, focus on improving standards, reduce cost of production, ensure responsiveness. That is what is called NPM. And this NPM treats people as consumers or customers. But what is the problem here? Can every citizen be a consumer or a customer? And should always the government focus on cost of production while providing services to the people? For example, law and order is a service provided by the government. There are some, say, communal violence in a particular district. Army has been called. The district collector has requested for the services of army, and army has been provided. And army had come from some other place, and they have ensured that law and order. After the army had left, then the district administration will calculate the amount of money the government had spent to bring army, to provide accommodation, to provide food and all these things to them. And it is found out that it is around, say, 50 crores. And each and every citizen of the district must pay at least 20,000 rupees. Should the citizens be paying for it? That is what NPM says. NPM says that provide services and charge money from the people. Should the government be doing like that? So can NPM be applied here? Or similarly disaster management. I give the example. The government has to evacuate people in the low-lying areas who are impacted by the cyclones and floods. Should the government charge money from everyone who is taking that boat ride? Sometimes people are evacuated through helicopters also. Should the government charge money from them? This helicopter ride otherwise normally costs 20,000 rupees, you pay 20,000 rupees, otherwise we will throw you into the water. Decide whether you want to pay money or you want to die. Should the government be doing like that? Please remember these questions are the ones they have asked last year. In 2025, whatever I am discussing was asked for 6 questions in your GS paper 1. Sorry, PABAD paper 1. Because NPM has so many limitations, and can a country like India afford NPM, wherein maximum number of people are poor people, wherein they cannot pay for the services? Should it mean that they should be left out of the services? Obviously not. This limitations of NPM has resulted in the emergence of NPS, New Public Service Approach. Limitations of NPM. Limitations of NPM has resulted in NPG, New Public Governance. How? This NPA, as part of NPA, government treats people as subjects to be governed. Welfare state, which India has opted for. Government says that we will take up a responsibility of maximizing your welfare to bring about socio-economic transformation with values and everything, which is a failure. This welfare state has been a failure. That is when we have seen the emergence of NPM. In NPM, the government will consider itself as a service provider and it treats people as consumers or customers. Consumers or customers. This again is a failure or a failure. Why? Government can never treat people as consumers or customers. Then that means you are asking the people to pay for services. Do the people, poor people, have the money to pay for services? No. Then what is the solution? The solution has come in the form of NPS, New Public Service, wherein the state will not treat people either as subjects or as customers or consumers, then what? As part of NPS, the state will treat people as citizens to be empowered. Treat citizens as to be as empowered. When you are talking about citizens, you are talking about their rights. You are talking about their participation. You are talking about transparency. You are talking about accountability. You are talking about justice. You are talking about equity. That is what is called NPS. And ultimately what we say? This NPS is a combination of NPA and NPM. It takes the best of NPA and NPM. NPM, what is the best of NPM? Economy and efficiency. What is the best of NPA? Effectiveness and equity. So NPS is equal to economy plus efficiency plus effectiveness plus equity. New public service. This is the essence of, again, your entire ethics paper. The government should not treat people either as subjects or as consumers or customers, but as citizens to be empowered. Ensure their participation and make sure that there is transparency. Then, fix accountability. Focus on inclusiveness. Ensure equity. Make sure that there is efficiency and economy. And then ensure fairness and justice. That is what is called NPS state, New Public Service State, wherein everything is there, the best of NPA and NPM. And how this NPS can be achieved? How this NPS can be achieved? This is where we talk about NPG, New Public Governance. This is where we talk about NPG, New Public Governance. This is where we talk about NPG, New Public Governance. Right? So what do we say here as part of NPG? We say that as part of NPG, previously state was the only institution responsible for governance as part of welfare state. Then as part of NPM, state along with private sector. What you call it as public-private partnership. That is what is called NPM. Part of what is known as neoliberal state. And what is the outcome? Both the state and private sector had come together and had become very powerful institutions. In the process, they are taking away the rights and the freedoms of the citizens. They had become exploitative. That is when we have seen the emergence of civil society organizations. We have seen the emergence of civil society organizations. These civil society organizations had come into existence to prevent the exploitative nature of the state and the markets. It mostly led to what is called chronic capitalism, the nexus between the state and the markets. And that is the reason why it is said that we must expand the scope of governance. It cannot be restricted to either state or the private sector. It must be expanded to include many other institutions. And that is when we talk about new public governance. New public governance goes beyond NPM state, wherein the decision making was mostly in the hands of the government and the private sector. And NPG, New Public Governance, talks about multi-actor paradigm model. in governance, wherein you are talking about the state, private sector, MNCs, multilateral institutions. This is part of privatization, this is part of globalization. Then the civil society organizations, NGOs, pressure groups, media, self-help groups, and then public-private partnerships. All of them are part of governance now. That means all of them are part of decision making and implementation processes. How governance has expanded as part of new public governance. Government is only one of the institutions. It is only one of the institutions. The state is only one of the institutions responsible for governance. The decisions now have to be taken by all these institutions combined together. How can they come together? Through network governance. That is how this networking governance comes into picture. They must come together through networking governance. These independent networks coming together, how this networking governance possible? With the help of digital governance. With the help of digital governance. As you can see here, all these terms are interlinked. Governance, good governance, new public governance, networking governance, digital governance. All of them are included. Why? NPG is directly related to NPG, new public governance is directly related to good governance. Why? NPG, how you are taking the decisions? By involving all these actors, that is what is participation. And how you are taking the decisions? Through consensus. And how you are taking the decisions? Through transparency. And how you are taking the decisions? Through accountability. That is what NPG. NPG is an extension of the concept of good governance. That is what we say. At this point of time, if you happen to read Dwight Waldo is known as is known for his NPA, and he also had chronicled the history of public administration. Not only that, he has also predicted the future of public administration. He said that in the future, because of this networking governance, we can have two different types of governments. What is it? First is a dictatorship, wherein all these independent networks are controlled, subjugated, regulated and directed by the state. State becomes so powerful, like what we have in most of the countries in the world, like China, Latin American countries, African countries, wherein everything is controlled. All of them are there, but everything will be controlled rigidly. And second, he said that we can move towards completely anarchy, either total domination, exploitation, or complete anarchy. That is what he said. Because all of them will be moving in different directions. And that is where a state can play a very important role. By bringing all these independent networks together, ensuring proper coordination and communication with the help of digital governance to prevent anarchy. That is what we say NPG is all about. Right? Last year, before last year, this year, all the questions will be about only this concept in your PABAD paper 1. All the questions about only this concept. Because that is the future of public administration. That is the future of public administration. Why all the questions only about this concept? Because once you become a district collector, this is what you are going to do. You have to deal with all the independent networks. That is when MP Fale becomes important. Integration. Constructive conflict. There is a lot of conflict between all of them. You can become constructive conflict provided you are coming out with an integrated solution that benefits everyone. That is what MP Fale says. Right? Anything? Is it clear?
So, good governance emerged independently, not because of flashback or backfiring of NPM. It emerged independently. NPM gave rise to two paradigms, NPS and NPG, and good governance influenced NPG in a way like so. NPS, it was a combination of state and private coming together of NPA and NPM, creating values and also efficiency. So, but NPG was expanding the stakeholders to involve the citizens and the other.
NPG is the instrument through which you can realize NPS. New public service approach can be realized with the help of new public governance. NPM is the instrument to realize NPA, some of the objectives of NPA. And good governance is the mother of all these things. That is the thing. From good governance only, all these things had come into existence.
So, can we say that NPG provides the instrument, it provides the tools, and NPS gives the goals?
That's what I am saying. NPS is the goal or objective or aim, which can be achieved through NPG. That's what. Right? Which one? This one? These things, anyway, we'll be discussing all of them in the class, don't worry. You have not, what I have said is that state is there, private sector, multinational companies, multilateral institutions. What are these multilateral institutions? IMF, World Bank, United Nations. As part of global constitutionalism, they are dictating terms to the countries. If you are a member of WTO, you have to give MFN status to everyone, most favored nation, like that. Right? And similarly, if you are a member of United Nations, if you are signing any global treaties, you must take responsibility for implementing them. Kyoto Protocol, Paris Summit, Copenhagen Summit, Glasgow Summit, they are all part of environmental summits. And you must fulfill the obligations. That is what is called multilateral institutions. Yeah. And don't think so, you will not be able to understand now. You will be able to understand them after I take classes for at least 1 week. I said this is not a class for beginners. You will not be able to understand. This is a class for those who have already studied and who are writing mains this year. So don't worry. You need at least 10 days of classes to understand these things. I have not gone deeply into any of these concepts. This is only for those who are writing mains this year. That means you have studied entire public administration to give them some kind of conceptual clarity. That's the thing. Development? And the development dynamics is always there. What is development dynamics? Development dynamics is there from 1930s onwards. Development dynamics means what? The dynamics of changes that have taken place in development administration. It started with 1930s with the state-led development. Then when it was a failure, the state-led development, we have moved towards market-led development. When it is a failure, we have moved towards state, market and everyone else. That is NPG. That's what.
They also come to the concept that there should be a proper administrative structure for it.
What do you mean by grafting is better than transplantation? For example, you are taking a plant which is grown in Siberia. If you transplant that plant, the tree, in a Thar desert in Rajasthan, will it survive? It will die. On the other hand, grafting means what? In biological sciences, it means creating the necessary conditions at that particular place in Thar desert for that plant to survive. Grafting is better than transplantation. In the same manner, take best of the practices of the developed countries and try to change them according to your own situation. Grafting. Take the case of Syrian charters. Create conditions. Why Syrian charters are successful in countries like USA, UK? Because there is awareness among the Syrians. Bureaucracy is still thinks that they are the civil servants. Do civil servants in India consider themselves as the servants of the people? What about awareness among the people about their rights in India? Then can Syrian charters be successful? Never. That is what we say. That is what we say. And that is the reason why create the conditions and then, and then implement them. What did countries like India do? We blindly copied the Western countries, their Western models, without creating the necessary conditions, because of which our administration has not been successful. The conditions, the ecology, the environment, the society in those countries is completely different from our. For example, within India only, there is so much of diversity. What is successful in, say, Kerala, can it be successful in UP? Never. That is what CPA talks about. That is what. Prismatic societies have so much of diversity. It is their strength and it is their weakness also. Why development administration in India is a failure? Because our central governments, any government that comes to power at a central level is always obsessed with what is called a one-size-fits-all approach. That's the reason why these kind of questions are asked. One size fits all. You are implementing the same scheme all over the country. And if you are implementing the same scheme all over the country, will it be successful? Conditions in Kerala are different from conditions in Kashmir. Is there any similarity between people from Kerala and Kashmir? Then how can it be successful? And that is the reason why UPSC asks these questions in our both paper 1 and paper 2 regularly. Right now, public administration is completely practical aspects. They are not focusing on any theories. Even in paper 1 also. Last year, that's what I said. Not even a single thinker was directly asked last year. Why? Because they are only focusing on practical aspects of public administration. And some students have sent me some questions. Let me answer those questions before we can proceed. Let me take up this question. The question says that red light and green light theories. Red light and green light theories provide contrasting approaches to the role of administrative law. Which of these two theories will be effective in achieving the objectives of administrative law? Justify your answer. When these kind of questions are asked, you don't know what is red light theory, or you don't know what is green light theory in administrative law. Right? What is administrative law? What is administrative law? In simple terms, what is administrative law? Administrative law is a law for administrators. Simple. Why you require a law for administrators? Because they have so much of power, and that power can be misused. To prevent the misuse of power, to prevent the abuse of authority, to protect the rights of the citizens, we need administrative law. As a district collector, you have so much of power. There is every possibility that you can misuse that power. As a superintendent of police, you have been given the power as part of administrative law to ensure law and order. To ensure law and order, you have been given the power to even punish people, kill them also. If they are Naxalites, you are going to the forest, you encounter Naxalites. You have to kill them. Will it be called a murder? And on the other hand, Naxalites kill you, it will be called murder and you will be arrested. That is what is administrative law. Giving powers. But what is the problem here? You are given powers. And what is the problem? The powers can be misused. Wherever there is power, power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is where we find this red light theories and green light theories as part of administrative law. Normally, you don't know what is red light theory and green light theory. How do you answer this question? Common sense. What is red light? What is the red light? Traffic signals. This red light is to prevent any kind of traffic congestion, control the traffic, ensure discipline. The objective of red light is to control, regulate. And what is green light? Giving more power, more freedom. Right? What is red light theory and what is green light theory in administrative law? Red light theory in administrative law means exactly to fix responsibility, to control, to regulate, and to minimize the scope for misuse of power. That is one aspect of administrative law. That is what is called red light theory. And what is green light as part of administrative law? Exactly. Basically, bureaucracy needs powers to perform their functions. For example, as a district collector, you need powers to perform the functions. Administrative law gives those powers. I gave you the example of superintendent of police. What is red light and what is green light here? For superintendent of police. Green light means the this CRPC, Criminal Procedure Code, IPC, Indian Penal Code. And then these legislation, these laws gives you powers to control and to maintain law and order. As I said, you have been given the power to punish criminals. You have been given the power to even kill criminals also. That is what is green light theory. And what is red light theory? These powers must be used in a controlled and regulated manner. Conduct rules and regulations. 1964 and 1968. So that these powers are not misused. So for administrative law, which is more important, red light or green light? Both are equally important. You need to give powers. Without powers, can the bureaucracy function? But can you give those powers unlimited? And that is the reason why you need both of them. That is what the answer you have to write. Even if you don't know anything about the question, you can easily answer. But having a common sense, what is red light and what is green light? Having common sense. Always tell the students only one thing all the time. In public administration, white is the easiest optional, because for 99% of the questions, the answer is always there in the question. Remaining 1%, the question itself is the answer. That is the reason why you don't require any kind of knowledge, because all the question, the answer is always there in the question. The question says that NPG has emerged because of the consequences of NPM. The answer is there. NPM has created a situation wherein the state has transformed itself into only a service provided which has restricted the scope of the state. That is the reason why NPM has emerged. The answer is there in the question itself. Right? Let us see what are the other questions that they have asked. This is the question they have asked in 2020. Productivity is not the result of working conditions. This is a statement made by Elton Mayo, human relations thinkers. Productivity is not the result of working conditions, but the result of emotional response of workers to work performed. Are Elton Moyer's findings relevant in the contemporary organizations? What did Elton Moyer say? Productivity of the workers in the organization is not the result of working conditions. Productivity or efficiency of workers is not because of working conditions. Then what is it? It is because of the emotional response of workers. A response of workers. That is what Elton Moyer has said. Workers become inefficient because their emotional needs are not satisfied by the organization. And that is the reason why they become inefficient. This is what Elton Moyer has said. And the question says that, do you agree with the statement? The question says that, do you agree with the statement? Why did Elton Moyer has made this statement? Because classical thinkers have said that productivity of organization depends on these things, working conditions. If you look at scientific management theory, what did it say? Productivity depends on working conditions. It depends on supervision. It depends on wages of the workers. Right? Piece rate system. Then what did Elton Moyer do? He conducted experiments. In a first experiment he has conducted was this great illumination experiment. Hawthorne, as part of Hawthorne, great illumination. Then he had conducted an experiment regarding the wages. Then he conducted an experiment regarding the supervisors, everything. And what did they find? They found out that there is neither working conditions nor the wages nor supervision has any kind of significant impact on the productivity of the workers. And then he conducted bank wiring experiments. And what is the outcome of all these experiments? He said that it is the emotional needs of the workers that is more important than physical working conditions. Social psychological factors influence workers' productivity more than physical working conditions. That is what Elton Moyer has said. The question says that, do you agree with this statement? It says that, are these findings relevant in contemporary organizations? Are they relevant in contemporary organizations? What are contemporary organizations? What are the contemporary organizations? Are the ones which are dominated by the service sector. Right now, all over the world, what really dominates the functioning of GDPs of countries around the world? Service sector. In service sector, what is the most important factor of production? What is the most important factor of production? Human resources. In manufacturing sector, what is the most important factor of production? Capital and machinery. Classical organizations are successful because at that point of time, industrial sector contributed maximum to the GDPs of the countries. Now, who is more important? Elton Moyer or classical thinkers? That is the question they have asked. If you understand the question, it is very easy. As I keep on saying all the time, the answer is always there in the question itself. So, do you believe that these emotional factors are the ones which influence workers' productivity? Definitely. Why? Because human resources. You have to cater to the emotional needs of the workers: self-esteem, recognition, prestige, dignity, honor, and coordination, this interpersonal relationships. Why? Because service sector consists of only human beings, human resources. And the thing is that if you look at the contemporary organizations, when people join the organization, their basic needs are satisfied. They are looking for higher level needs. That is self-esteem needs and self-actualization needs. And that is fulfilled only with Elton Moyer. That is the reason why we said that he is very important. But does it mean that these physical working conditions and those things are not important? No, they are equally important. They're equally important. Give the example. When the people are asked to work from home, it has been found that most of the companies found that their efficiency levels are going down. Why? Physical working conditions. If you are working from home, you have so much of disturbance at home. And we have seen moonlighting also. That is what you have to write. Have you heard about this moonlighting? Yes, what is it? You know, they are not only working their the work of their office, they are also taking up other jobs also. Moonlighting, which impacted their efficiency. Exactly, systematic soldiering. That is the reason why both classical thinkers and human relation thinkers are equally important. This is where you need again practical knowledge, current events, right? Next, Chester Bernard, in the functions of the executive, injected the social in the study of our nation. Explain in this context how the executive is expected to play a much greater role than a manager. Chester Bernard, a behavioralist thinker, has injected the term social in the organization. How the leader or the executive is expected to play a much greater role than the manager in organization. How did Chester Bernard define organization? He defined organization as a social organization consisting of dynamic human beings. Classical thinkers defined organization as a physical structure consisting of different hierarchical levels. That is the difference. Classical thinkers defined organization as a physical structure consisting of different hierarchical levels. Classical thinkers never gave importance to human beings. They converted the workers into machines. Classical thinkers. Whereas Chester Bernard, defined organization as a social organization consisting of dynamic human beings. Right? Wherein you have to give importance to social and psychological needs of the workers. And this is where the difference between the leader and manager. In classical organization, the manager is only concerned about productivity and efficiency. Is he concerned about the workers? No. Why? In classical organizations, he is not at all concerned about the workers because the manager is only concerned about the work but not the workers. And the classical thinkers, what did they do? They simplified human motivation by saying that they are motivated only by monetary considerations. Give them money, they will work. That is what classical organizations say. But in reality, is it the case? No. They are looking for something more than money. What are they? That is what we study with Chester Bernard. Specific inducements and general incentives. And as a leader, you must cater to both specific inducements and general incentives. That is the reason, that is the difference between a leader and a manager. That's what. Yeah. The satisfaction contribution equilibrium can be achieved by ensuring that these specific inducements and the general incentives are present so that they can maximize their satisfaction. Once they maximize their satisfaction, then they can automatically improve their contribution. That is what. It is all about explaining the statement. In UPSC examination, in public administration, you are explaining the statement and giving examples from Indian administration. Give the example of civil servants. Civil services in India. The government makes sure that civil servants have all these incentives that are provided to them. They take care of their self-esteem needs. They take care of physical working conditions. They take care of their intentions, noble intentions also. Everything is taken care of. That is the reason why they are success. They can be successful also. That is what we say here. Chester Bernard becomes very, very important. Right? Next, this is what they have asked. Let me see any other question they have asked. Yeah. This is the question they have asked. This was asked in 2020. This is regarding scientific management theory. These kind of questions really test your theoretical knowledge and conceptual clarity. In Taylor's scientific management theory, SMT, comment. And it was asked for, I think, 10 marks or 20 marks, whatever it may be, 15 marks. So what have you understood by this question?
Well, prescribing scientific gives some certain principles. In this, some were analysis principles like measuring time study, work study, those things. Those were principles of analysis. And principles of actions such as P-square rate system, functional formation, they were all combined into one general principles of scientific management.
Whenever you are answering the questions, you should be answering the why aspect of the question, not what aspect of the question. Why in Taylor's scientific management theory, principles of analysis and the principles of action were not differentiated. Why they were not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management theory?
He himself was the manager involved in the
Why they were not differentiated? First of all, what is the difference between principles of analysis and principles of action? What is the difference between principles of analysis and principles of action? What is the difference? What is the difference between principles of analysis and the principles of action? Then, why Taylor did not differentiate between them in his scientific management theory? Then, is it true that he did not differentiate? What is your opinion? Right? That is what you have to write here. First of all, why did Taylor came out with the scientific management theory in the first place? He had come out with scientific management theory because he had observed the conditions in his own organization. And after observing the conditions in those organizations, he had realized that these industrial organizations are suffering from problems of economy and efficiency. This is resulting in conflict between the management and the workers. Management was looking for profits, workers were looking for wages. And they believed that their conflicts are always conflicting, their interests are always conflicting in nature. Then what did he do? He analyzed the situation from macro perspective. He analyzed the situation. He started asking the question why they are fighting with each other. Why? Because both of them believe that their interests are conflicting in nature. Why? Managers can maximize their profits only by reducing the wages of workers. Workers can maximize their wages only by reducing the profits of managers. And that is what you call two-person zero-sum game. One person can win at the cost of another person. That is when he analyzed the situation and he said that, he can come out with a solution through what he called it as mental revolution. Please remember, the solution was provided by another popular, famous thinker to this problem. And who was that other thinker who provided the solution? Who was much more popular, much more famous than Taylor? Karl Marx. Karl Marx provided a solution. What is the solution provided by Karl Marx? He said that capitalism is always going to be a system of exploitation because there is no saturation point for the profits of the capitalists. Workers will always be exploited. So what is the solution? Wither away capitalism. Capitalism should be thrown out. And workers should take control over the factories. Government should take control over the factories. Socialism. And he asked the workers to revolt against the government. Violent revolution. Against the government. Against the capitalist. Armed revolution. Is it possible in a civilized society? The other solution was provided by Taylor. Taylor also spoke about revolution. What is that revolution? Mental revolution. He said that let workers and management change their minds and believe that their interests are not conflicting, but their interests are harmonious. Right? That is what he said. Coming back to this question, this is what we say analysis. And how to bring that mental evolution, that is where we talk about action. How? And that is where he said that recruitment on the basis of merit, scientific merit. Then specialized training should be given. Then objective performance evaluation. Then piece rate system. Piece rate system. He said that on the basis of the analysis, he had come to the conclusion that people work only for money. And on the basis of this analysis, he had concluded that if we pay them the workers more, they will work more also. Piece rate system. On the one side analysis, other side action. Why they are combined together? Why? Because Taylor was looking at the problems of the organization at the lowest level. That is shop floor level. At shop floor level, you cannot differentiate between policy formulation and implementation. Both of them are interlinked. That is why principles of analysis and principles of action are not differentiated. And this is at the shop floor level. Shop floor level means in industrial organizations where the production actually takes place, wherein the workers come into contact with the management. That is where analysis and action are always intertwined. You cannot differentiate. And that is what is the scientific measurement theory. That is what you have to write. When can you differentiate? When top level management headquarters taking policy decisions and the decisions are implemented at the field level. That is where you can differentiate. That is where you can have the difference between principles of analysis and principles of action. But at the shop floor level, both of them are intertwined. That is what you have to write. Right? As I said, the answer will always be there in the question itself. But you require conceptual clarity. This kind of conceptual clarity you will not get in reading the books. For example, this Prasad and Prasad will not give you this kind of clarity. Right? Anything else? Let me see. Did I ask any other question? Yes, the thing is that you have to cultivate this. Not think, you need proper guidance, because how can you think this? They will not be there in the books. Even if you start thinking, you will not be able to come to this level of a thought process. That is the reason why guidance is important. Right? And let me see another question they have asked. UPSC, frames questions with a lot of content for 10 markers and vague questions for 20 markers. That is the problem. The problem is that for 10 marker, you have so much of content to write. For 20 marker, the questions are so vague that you don't have any content also. UPSC is not a good organization. They are not a good organization. Their objective is not to select the candidates. Their objective is to eliminate. And they will use all the tricks in the book to eliminate. You have to bear with it. Can you do anything about it? Why not? Why you cannot do anything? Beggars cannot be choosers. Whatever UPSC gives as a question paper, you have to write answers. Can you say that this question is against the principles of natural justice? Wherein, principles of natural justice demands fairness, justice and equity. And this question does not fit into either fairness or justice or equity, so I will not write answer to this question. UPSC, please understand my situation and give me marks also. God bless you. Will they give you out of 20, 12 marks? You have to write. So, for a 10 marker, this question is asked for writing 10 marks. You have to be very, very precise. You always focus on the why aspect of the question. Very important. Why aspect of the question. That is where, you can be writing very precise answers. That is the reason why I always say, why only in a public administration optional, in GS papers also, that is the same thing you find. In GS papers, at least you can have some contempt. In economy and polity, those kind of things, you can have some content also. But what you have to remember is that you have to always focus on the why aspect of the question. Why this question? Why they are not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management theory. Why? Because Taylor had come out with scientific management theory to provide solutions to industrial organizations at the shop floor level. That is where you cannot differentiate. Whereas, take the case of Henry Fayol. His principles are different. Why? He had come out with his theory for all organizations, especially at the topmost level. That is the reason why Henry Fayol had come out with 5 principles of management, or 5 managerial principles: POCCC, planning, organization, coordination, command and control. Why? Because he was looking at the organizations from higher perspective. There you can differentiate between planning and implementation. In Taylor's scientific management theory, can you differentiate between them? Because at the lowest level, Taylor spoke about work study, motion study and time study. That is done at the lowest level by the supervisors. And they come out with the solutions by observing the work of the workers. They are doing the analysis and they are also coming out with the action as part of principles. And that is what you have to write. Any question, you must always look for conceptual clarity in paper 1. Anything you are writing, whether it is the theories or NPM, NPA, good governance, NPG, all of them, in the best part of public administration is that every concept can be interlinked to any other concept. Public policy can be linked to comparative public administration. It can be linked to behavioral theories. It can be linked to classical theories. Because with the classical theories have come behavioral theories. With behavioral theories has come CPA. From CPA, development administration. From development administration, public policy. Everything is interlinked. From public policy, personal administration, financial administration. They are all part of public policy. So where is the question of not finding content? Tell me. 20 mark question might look vague, but if you say that not finding content, you are wrong, because everything can be interlinked. For 20 marker question, you can write essay also by interlinking all of them. I said, if the question is about public policy, link it to development administration, which can be linked to CPA, which can be linked to behavioral thinkers, which can be linked to classical thinkers, which can be linked to personal administration, and which can be ultimately linked to financial administration. Then your answer will have so many dimensions, and you are interlinking all those dimensions and link all of them to Indian administration. automatically you will be writing the best of the answers. And looking at your knowledge, examiner will have, evaluator will have tears in his eyes. And he thinks that, you have become the new thinker of public administration. And you are now in a position to write a new book. Not administrative thinkers, only administrative thinker. You are the only one. Right? It's not difficult. It's not at all difficult, because as you can see here, how I have interlinked governance, good governance, NPA, NPM, then NPS and NPG. Any question about these things, I will interlink all of them, and I will be writing essays. And if it is only 10 marker, I will be writing specifically about them. That is the difference between 10 marker and 20 marker. 10 marker very specific, 20 marker interlink. Then you will be writing best of the answers also. What is there in the syllabus of public administration beyond this? Nothing else is there. Only thing is your ability to interlink. And only another thing is that, the mistake committed by the students is that, most of the students, this is what the mistake they commit. I have seen, we are conducting the test series also. I can see that in some of the answers, what I can see that the candidates, they are so enthusiastic to display their knowledge, writing so many things, so many thinkers, so many thoughts. UPSC is not at all interested in your knowledge. Please remember, the person who is evaluating your answer sheet has definitely more knowledge than you, because you have studied public administration only for 3-4 years. He has studied for 35 years, being a professor. Can you impress that person with your knowledge? He has read hundreds of books. You have read only one book, maybe 2 books. Can you impress? Then how can you impress? Can you impress the person with your knowledge? Then how can you impress? You can impress the evaluator with your analysis. Analysis. What is this analysis? Understanding the question, focusing on the why aspect of the question, conceptual clarity. You need in-depth and precise knowledge about the concepts, and most important, simplicity. The answers you are writing should be so simple that they should be so simple that even a 10th standard student, forget about 10th standard, even a 7th standard student should be able to understand what you are writing. That kind of simplicity is important. Please remember, that kind of simplicity is the most difficult thing in this world. That is what we say in English language, that the easiest thing in this world is to make things complicated. And the most difficult thing in this world is to make things simple. If I show you the answer sheets of, my students, top rankers, last year also one of my students, she scored around 296 marks, I think 298 top score. If I show you her answers, you will say that these answers are so simple. I can write these answers at any point of time with my left hand also. The only problem is you don't know how to write with left hand. That is the thing. Simplicity. Whether you are writing general studies or public administration, your answers should be so simple that any person should be able to understand. You are writing answers in economy, GS paper 3. A person who has absolutely no knowledge of economics must be able to understand clearly what you are writing. When can they understand? When you write simple concepts, simple language, simple analysis. And that is what the secret of success. That is the reason why few years back UPSC has also asked an essay. Simplicity is the most sophisticated form. And it is not difficult. It is not that easy to write. If I show you the answers of Pradeep, who got number 1 rank. if I show you his answers of, say, public administration or ethics or essay or anything, you will say that these answers are so simple, I could have written with my left hand. I don't know why he got number 1 rank. If I were to be the person, I will not give him any rank, forget about number 1 rank. But you try to write, you will not be able to write. Why? Because this simplicity will come only when you understand the things in a simple manner. This is where simple manner, understanding things in a simple manner. Why it is not? Why? Because scientific measurement theory has been developed for industrial organizations at shop floor level. At shop floor level, you cannot differentiate between planning and execution. That is why the answer. How simple it is. But again, to understand this, the simple thing is the most difficult thing in this world. And take any of the thinkers, it is very easy. Because the thoughts might be complicated. They might have explained. If you read Joseph Bernard's original, The Functions of the Executive, you will not be able to understand anything, the kind of language, complicated language they use. But your ability lies in understanding them in a very simple manner and putting them in the examination. As I have said here, the difference between leader and manager, simple. Why manager, is, why leader is more important than manager? Why leader is greater than manager? Classical thinkers only focused on manager, but not leader. Why? The job of a manager is only to get the things implemented strictly according to rules and regulations. Classical managers do not require any kind of ability. They just need only supervision. Everything has to be done one best way of performing the task. Whereas leader is not the one like that. Leader has to motivate the people, has to ensure effective communication, has to focus on satisfaction, contribution, equilibrium, has to focus on communication, has to formulate policies. That is what is leader. And that is what you have to write. And if you have this kind of conceptual clarity, automatically you will be doing very well also. And that is what is the secret of success. As someone has asked this question, as I mentioned about how to frame the answers for 10 markers and 20 markers. Simple. Yeah, you only. Okay, yeah, okay, fine. You are only one, right? It is very easy. Why? Because, as I said, 10 marker, you are only focusing on the concept and why aspect, and not thinking about anything else. 20 marker, question is vague, interlink everything, and you will be writing best answer. Very simple. 20 mark. As I said, the question is about, say, new public governance. Link it to NPS. Link it to NPM, link it to good governance. Then you will be writing a very good answer. The question might be vague, but you are writing an answer which is, covering all the dimensions. The examiner will be really impressed. Saying that even though I have asked a vague question, he is able to write a very beautiful answer. Very clear-cut answer. That is what you have to do. And this is how, you will be getting marks. Not only in the public administration, in our GS papers also, especially ethics paper. Yeah. See, nowadays, what is UPSC doing? First question and fifth question, they are compulsory. There are no choices. Here you have to write 5 questions, 5 into 10, 50 marks. Here also 5 questions, 5 into 10, 50 marks, 100 marks. Right? Then you have 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. From these 6 questions, you have to answer 3 questions. And you think that you have a lot of choices. No. UPSC says that you must answer at least 1 question from every section. So, here 1 question becomes compulsory, here 1 question becomes compulsory. So, you have choice only for 1 question at the end of the day. Right? Exactly. Now comes here. What UPSC doing now is that second question. they have 3 parts, A, B, C. Third question, again 3 parts, A, B, C. The first one is 15 marks, this is 15 marks or 20 marks. Or 20 marks, 20 marks and 10 marks. Now, to make your life complicated, what is UPSC doing? They will ask, this is second, this is third, A, B, C. What they are doing is that, here they will give 2 easy questions. Here also they will give 2 easy questions. And this question is very difficult, this question is also very difficult. Which one you should opt? That is the problem, right? This is always the problem. Because I said, please remember UPSC is not a good organization. That is the thing that you have to remember all the time. Their objective is to always to fail you in the examination. They are not at all interested in passing you. What you have to do? If the questions are asked like this, then compare. Here, let us assume that A and C are easy. Here, B and C are easy. So, between this A, C and B and C, which one is the one where you are more comfortable with? Where you can write best of the answers. For example, here, B and C 20 marks, that is 40 marks. If you are writing here, you are writing best answers for 40 marks. Here, you are writing best answers for, say 20 plus 15, 35. Then what you should be selecting? This one. Because 40 is always more than 35. Next thing, let us assume that both of them are the same. This is also 35 marks and this is also 35 marks. Right? Then you try to see between this 35 and this 35, where you have chances of getting more marks. For example, if it is purely theoretical question, the chances of getting good marks are less. That is when you have to look at for those questions which are more application oriented. That is where you can show your creativity. Purely theoretical. If it is a purely theoretical question, what happens? Everyone will write the answer. If everyone writing a good answer, do I feel like giving you good marks? Because your answer is same as others. That is where you have to select. Select a question which is more creative. Because you have to take the risk. Who is an entrepreneur? Entrepreneur is a person who takes risks and earns profit through those risks. And that is what you have to do. Right? Select those questions where there is a little bit more scope for creativity. Because otherwise, this B and this A, both of them are equally difficult. So you have to look for not this 10 marks here or 10 marks here. You have to look for the 40 marks in the rest of the questions. Because here 10 marks and here 10 marks, you will be getting maximum 3 marks only. So it does not really matter whether you are selecting this or this. But remaining 2 becomes very important. And how to select? On the basis of having a lot of scope for creativity in your answers. Where you can show your creativity. Where you think you can have better interlinkages. Where you think that you can use your knowledge and link it to Indian administration. Where you think you can come out with better creative solutions. That is when you will automatically get good marks. That is how you have to select it. Right? And of course, remaining question, sections you can always select 2 questions. But what do people do is that they forget the basic things also. They look at the question paper and they see section A. They know all the 3 questions. They will write all the 3 questions, forgetting the fact that they have to write 1 question from here also. So many of my students have done that also. Then that means you will not be attending 50 marks. You will be writing only for 200 marks. Never do those kind of things. Very, very important. Don't get emotional. Right? That is the reason why GS papers are the best. Why? No choice. You have to write answers to every question. Essay also the same thing. Essays, they are giving 4 essays in section A and 4 essays in section B. And you think that you have so much of choice. But again, the essay topics can be very, very dangerous. Some topics are very easy, and if you select them, you will get average marks. And some topics are very difficult. If you select them, you don't know what kind of marks you will get also. And you have to prepare for them. Creative essays, very important. Right? So that is what it is. Any other doubts you have? Any other doubts? Hmm? In a conclusion, you must remember that what is the objective of this conclusion? All of you are going to be administrators, right? And what is the most important quality of an administrator? What is the most important quality an administrator must possess? Yes, that should be your conclusion. Conclusion should always be ending with solutions. The questions will start with the problem. Conclusion should always be ending with solutions. This shows whether you have that kind of administrative aptitude or not. As an administrator, you should always be looking for solutions. What is the point of narrating the problem? Unless and until you come out with the solution. Especially in GS papers, that is what you have to remember. You have to come out with solution, and the solution should be practical solution, not only idealistic solutions. You cannot say that everyone should be honest, everyone must be selfless. If that is the case, there is no need for any society also, no need for government. If everyone is honest, do you require any government? Since people are not honest, that is the reason why we need government. So you cannot be writing idealistic solutions. You have to come out with practical solutions as an administrator. And that should be your conclusion. Very important. Any question that you are writing, you have to come out with this kind of conclusion. Yes? So, that is it. Any other doubts you have? And then any kind of doubts, you can always message me. And all of you have my number, you can always message me. I will clarify those doubts also. Right, about an answer writing for this optional as well as for general studies also. Right? Pardon? See, the only thing is that if you do the answer writing, that will be helpful only when you have the necessary knowledge. The objective of answer writing is to improve the quality of your answers. When can you improve? When you have the necessary knowledge. That is where, because in public administration, the thinkers part, the theories part, it requires conceptual clarity, like the one which we have discussed with a scientific management theory. And that is not possible through maybe the tests. Because I have only discussed one question, but there are so many other questions like that. That is when it can become problematic. If you have not done anything, you can always join the classes. Right? Any other question? You are not reading anything separately for public administration. Whatever that you are reading for general studies is what you have to study for public administration also. That is the reason why if you are good with your general studies, you will always be writing best answers in public administration. Reverse is also true. If you are writing very good answer in public administration, you will always be doing very well in GS. In the last 12 years, all my students who have scored around 300 marks in public administration invariably scored 140 marks in GS paper 2 and GS paper 4. Because the syllabus is the same. You are not reading anything separately, newspapers only, nothing else. Yes, reports, but again they have become mostly now outdated also, 2009. But still you can go through them because The recommendations are not implemented, so the recommendations are always evergreen. Exactly, yeah. Right, let me see, anyone online asking questions? I don't think so, right. Right, so that is enough, best of luck, right, yeah, yeah.
Your preparation may look complete, but UPSC Prelims 2026 showed something important. Completion is not the same as readiness. The paper did not just test whether aspirant had read a topic, it tested whether they could think through it. Could they eliminate smartly? Could they connect static concepts with current issues? Could they stay calm when the question was not direct? Could they take decisions under pressure? That is where many aspirants struggle, not because they did not study, but because their preparation stayed in input mode, reading more, collecting more, revising passively. UPSC needs more than that. It needs a preparation system that turns knowledge into judgment. That is what the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course is built for. Concepts are taught in a connected sequence. Current affairs is linked with static subjects. Tests help you identify gaps before the exam does. Answer writing builds structured thinking for mains. Mentorship helps correct your direction early. Build readiness from the beginning. VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course.